defeat my enemy, I extinguish his life and consume him as I consume these flames.
That, my friends, is the minority vote.
Have you ever wanted to know who wins? Romans or Vikings? The question is, who wins? Men or women? Well, we have to go back a long way for that. Back through time. Back to the beginning. Excerpts from the Illuminati Bible. Pseudoscience. The Eighth Plague. Plague of locusts in America. So the story begins again. The Ninth Plague. 3 days, darkness. The firstborn will die next. When Moses led his people out of the house of slavery. Sumerian mythology. When the ice on the Caucasus melted, it triggered the flood. Eridu was one of the oldest, probably even the oldest Sumerian city. It is located in southern Mesopotamia under Tel Abu-Shahrein in what is now southern Iraq. According to Sumerian myth, it is the place where history began. In the Sumerian king list, Eridu is mentioned as the city of the first, mythical, kings Alulim and Alaulgar. This undoubtedly puts it at the beginning of a chain of city foundations. Unlike earlier places like Jericho or Catalhoyuk, it was the starting point of a civilization, the first city worthy of the name. Its village precursors date back to the pre-Sumerian period up to the 6th millennium BC. Eridu housed the main sanctuary of Enki, the Sumerian god of fresh water and the creative spirit, which shows its special position among the cities. Alongside the sky god Uruk and the wind god Enlil, Nippur, it belongs to the highest Sumerian triad of gods. Enki, the lord of the earth, or Akkadian Ea, is related to Western translated Aya, he lives. Is the name of the Sumerian god of wisdom and ruler of the lower part of the cosmic freshwater ocean, in the interior of which the god Enlil created air and earth. Enki is also considered the god of craftsmen, artists, and magicians. Enlil represents the council chairman of the Sumerian alliance of gods. The Anunnaki party around Anu owns the upper sky, while the Ijigu party around Enki owns the earth below. The tablets of fate are the symbol of rule over the universe in Mesopotamian mythology. They were chosen by Mami, the mother goddess, for Enlil. In later times, the Babylonian Marduk, who was replaced for a time by the usurper Gilgamesh, and the Assyrian Assur were also masters of the tablets of fate. These, presented as clay tablets with cuneiform writing and engraved cylinder seals, were understood as a permanent legal document that gave the god Enlil his highest authority as ruler of the universe. The Anunna, who are of the seed of Anu, represent the divine council of elders of women in Sumerian religion. The Anunna were also given the title, the Great of the Great Gods. The Anunna do not correspond to the Anunnaki in Akkadian tradition, as they did not hold the rank of underworld gods and are not men. Overlord, Brave One, Inanna is called the proudest of all Anunna deities, whose orders make the other Anunna crawl. Without Inanna, no sophisticated council decision is approved, because women have the right to vote. When the gods had to work like humans, there was a dispute between the upper Anunnaki and the Ijigu, the male lower gods. While the latter were responsible for securing the supply of the land by creating irrigation canals, for which they dug out the beds of the Euphrates and Tigris rivers, the female Anunnaki ruled from above, presumably watching over the implementation of their plans and accordingly dividing up the fruits of this major civilizing project, which transformed the arid steppe Eden into a blooming garden at their discretion. Due to the difficulty of their work, however, the male Ijigu felt overwhelmed and began to rebel against the upper gods. At night they surrounded the dwelling of Enlil, who was considered the main god of Sumerian culture, the creator of air and earth in the midst of the cosmic waters. Enlil was surprised and called for Anu and Enki. Nusku, one of Enlil's sons and ambassador, tried to negotiate with the rebellious party, but found that there was nothing to negotiate and was unsuccessful. Enlil then asked the mother goddess Nintu to create humans. Nintu explained that he could only do this with the active help of the male Enki. Enki, who agreed, then advised the assembly of all the gods to first purify themselves before everything else. Amidst drum beats, he then began to create the being Wademu. In the gardens and on the streets, the wife and husband wooed each other. The wombs are gathered, Nintu sits, counting the months. The 10th month came, then she opened the womb. I have created, my hands did it, the midwife made the consecrated one rejoice. It is not good that man should be alone, therefore let us make a woman, Eve, who will help him and who will suit him. 1,200 years later, people had multiplied to such an extent that their noise disturbed the gods. Enlil was outraged and decided that the underworld god Namtar would wipe out some of the people again with frost fever and influenza. A great mass extinction began. But Enki, probably worried that he would end up having to work again himself, approached his faithful priest Atreus and advised him the following: no longer should the other gods be worshipped, but only Namtar. The god of deadly diseases was so flattered by this that he had barely begun his pandemic work of eliminating people. After another 1,200 years, people had increased in number again and were roaming around like roaring herds of animals. Because the upper gods could no longer even sleep, Enlil sent his weather god Adad and, 1,200 years later, the fertility goddess Nisaba to devastate the land with storms and dry up the crops. But Enki always told his priest Atreus what to do about it. Only Adad and Nisaba were sacrificed, the other gods were left to starve. Adad and Nisaba were so ashamed of this undeserved privilege that they stopped their endeavor. Enlil was now completely angry with Enki and decreed that a massive flood should now wipe out all of humanity. In addition, he made Enki swear before the Anunnaki not to speak a word to humans again. Then he began to consult with the assembled gods about the exact date and duration of the flood to be unleashed. When Adad gathered the clouds and the winds began to roar from all corners of the world, Atreus and a few selected people climbed into the ship and sealed the entrance hatch from the inside with earth pitch. Like a pot, the ark now whirled down powerfully along the thundering flood on the waves from the opened heavenly sluices of the cosmic primordial waters. The other gods, however, suffered from hunger, since in the midst of the raging chaos they could no longer find people who could feed them through sacrifices. They wept over the enormous destruction. Atreus descended from his ark and began, with zealous zeal, to make a food offering to all the gods without distinction. How happy the gods were, who had been starving for so long! As if they were flies lured by the scent, they swarmed from all sides and began to feast to their heart's content over the fire of the altar for which they later endowed Anthraes, also known as Noah, with their immortality and gratitude, and settled him and his wife on the island of Dilmun, located on the far edge of the world. Enlil, however, who as a wise ruler was responsible for the well-being of this great culture, remained deeply angry with Enki, the guilty one, because of whose betrayal some people had once again managed to survive their planned genocide. However, Enki, as always never at a loss for creative ideas, devised a way that, according to his wishes, would be suitable for finally solving the problem that the quarreling gods had brought upon themselves. He ordered that people would now be made aware of suffering and death from birth, that there would be infertile and untouchable women, and that their lifespan would be severely limited from the start, biblically to 120 years, in the hope that their reproduction would be regulated in the future. With this promise that the gods would have enough living space of their own on earth for all time, Enlil was able to content himself and make peace with Enki. Anu was not the first god and lord. And after him came Enlil. And after him came Enki. And Enki had 3 sons. Anu, he is assigned the number 60. Anu, in Babylonian mythology, Anu continued to be worshipped as the sky god and king of the gods. His equivalent god in Akkadian mythology was Anu, who was also considered the supreme god and ruler of heaven. Number 50. Enlil, the god of winds, air, earth, and storms. In Babylonian mythology he was often identified with Marduk, the supreme god of Babylon. Marduk took on many of Enlil's functions and was also worshipped as a powerful storm god. Number 40. Enki, Ea. In Babylonian mythology, Ea remained the deity of water, knowledge, and creation. His role was also partially taken over by other gods such as Adad, also known as Iskar, the god of rain and storms. Enki, also known as Marduk, Prometheus, or Poseidon. Number 30. Nana, Sin. The moon god Nana was also worshipped in Babylonian mythology, but often remained in the shadow of Sin, the moon god of Akkadian mythology, who served similar functions. Number 20. Shamash, Utu. The sun god Shamash maintained his importance in Babylonian mythology and continued to be worshipped as the god of light, justice, and law. Number 10. Ishtar, Inanna. Ishtar was also worshipped in Babylonian mythology, although she was sometimes associated with other goddesses such as Astarte or Ninurta, who were also associated with love, fertility, and war. Excerpt Akkadian mythology. Sin, better known as Hadad, also known as Ishkur, Ramman, or Satan. Sin, the strong striking, thunder god. Often depicted wearing a horned helmet. Or also known as Zeus, Horus, or Baal. When Sin, Samus, and Ishtar tried to share world domination with him and sent his child, the seven gods, against Sin, who surrounded Sin and thereby triggered a lunar eclipse. Only Ea could free Sin. And so the sons broke the alliance with the god Anu, the Father, the Lord, and the Holy Spirit. In the myth of Ishtar's descent into hell, Carnugia, the land of no return, is described in more detail. Ishtar turned her mind to Carnugia, the land of no return, to the dark house of Irkalla, to the house who enters it does not leave again, on the path whose tread is without return, to the house whoever enters it lacks light, where dust is their hunger, clay is their food, they do not see the light, they sit in darkness. And here begins the story of the Old Testament. Long story short. The story of Ham, Shem, and Japheth. One stayed, one was bandaged, and one left. Perhaps one died. Sin wandered off. He was seen in Mecca and in Yemen. He went to Iraq, then to Iran, Turkmenistan, India, perhaps as far as China. Then he turned around and made a loop over Kazakhstan, further west. He founded a city and then a new city and so on and so forth. But then he received a message from his brother from Mesopotamia. Moses led his people out of Egypt, out of the house of slavery. And so they renewed their covenant with God, the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Sin came, made a loop over Greece, and the Dorian migration began. The Heraclids came and conquered the Mycenaean barbarians, and with them Hellas and the Sea Peoples came to Mesopotamia and Egypt. Earthquakes shook the land as Moses led his people to freedom. Like locusts, Sin ate his way through the land until nothing, absolutely nothing, was left. After conquering Greece, 3 cities were founded: Corinth, Athens, and Sparta. In 200 BC, the Hellenes joined forces with the Romans. A short time later, Caesar came to power, and just 100 years later, the Reds controlled all of Europe. In 400 AD, Rome split into West and East. The Byzantine Empire. The Reds were always on the ground. But they're like, stand up. Now what does that have to do with today? Or with the Vikings? Or the Ukraine? It's simple. God is coming flying. There was probably another rift in the Eastern Roman Empire between Zeus and Odin. At some point in the Dark Ages in 800 AD, when the Reds were hungry and on the ground again and the world was once again in chaos, the Vikings came to the Ukraine like sheep. And Crimea and Ukraine are Magog's territory according to the family map. So, if you ever wanted to know who wins, Romans or Vikings, lions or sheep, at least no one has been eaten yet. Trivia. Rus means red in Russian, and the word son, Sin Hanok, translates as blood servant. Blood is power, you eat what you eat. Simple calculations. Let's assume Adam was 3,750 before Christ. Let's say 5 generations every 100 years. 50 generations every 1,000 years. 250 generations in 5,000 years. Empires can fall and rise again like the phoenix, change or disappear. But if you live in Rome for 1,000 years, well, yes. You can get the Roman out of Rome, but never Rome out of the Roman. The reality is much crazier than any film. If you liked the video, please subscribe and like it, In truth, Ukrainians are on a scale of 1 to 100, where 1 means good and 100 means totally fucked. Then the answer is 1047.